Next up, a look at our top business stories of the day. And for that, our business editor, Kate Moody, joins me here in the studio. Kate, Germany, like many countries in Europe, extending, beefing up lockdown restrictions. That sparked anger in the tourism industry.
Yeah,
why.
well, because there's a little bit of confusion about what is and what isn't allowed in Germany. These new measures restrict domestic travel, but they don't close the borders or impose quarantine time after international travel. They merely require a negative COVID test result for anyone entering the country. Now, last weekend saw a stream of German tourists flood to Spain before the national restrictions were extended. That travel could now continue despite the lockdowns. Meanwhile, German hotels and holiday apartments remain closed for tourists. Germany's tourism industry has warned that the ongoing restrictions could lead to thousands of job cuts, as have retailers that are deemed non-essential and which have been closed since before Christmas. Take a listen.
Der seit 100 Tagen andauernde Lockdown für den Non-Food-Einzelhandel ist dramatisch. Wir befürchten, dass wir zwischen 80.000 und 120.000 Geschäfte, Unternehmen verlieren werden. Vormals wirklich gesunde Unternehmen in den Innenstädten, Mode, Textilhäuser, Sportartikelgeschäfte, Schuhgeschäfte, all das, was wir uns in einer Heimatstadt definitiv für den Handel wünschen. Die Umfrage sagt sehr deutlich, dass über 60% der Innenstadthändler insolvenzgefährdet sind, wenn es jetzt nicht einen Weg aus dem Lockdown heraus gibt.
The U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen have been testifying to a U.S. congressional committee about the prospects of the U.S. economic recovery. Both suggested that the U.S. economy and labor force would need still more support to recover from the pandemic. Yellen confirmed that the administration is considering a hike of the corporate tax rate, in part to help fund a $3 trillion infrastructure bill, which is being discussed by the administration now and which could be unveiled in the coming weeks. She also defended the recovery bill as necessary to protect the most vulnerable households. Take a listen.
1 in 10 homeowners with a mortgage are behind on their payments, and almost 1 in 5 renters are behind on their rent. There are 22 million people who say they don't have enough food to eat. 1 in 10 adults are hungry in America. I looked at data like these and I worried that the COVID economy was going to keep hurting millions of people now and haunt them long after the health emergency was over.
Janet Yellen in that socially distanced testimony earlier on. Well, let's check in on the day's trading action now. A muted session on Wall Street saw stocks turning sharply lower in the last hour or so of trade. You can see losses of nearly 1% for the Dow Jones, a bit more than that for the Nasdaq, about 0.75 of a percentage point for the S&P 500. Investors not thrilled about that promise to tackle the U.S. corporate tax rate. That's something that could affect companies that are listed on Wall Street there. A mostly lower close for the major European indices saw for the Frankfurt DAX ending just above the flat line. Losses between 4 and 0.6 of a percentage point in London, Paris and Milan. AstraZeneca shares dropped 1.75% in London. EU leaders are to meet later this week amid an escalating row over COVID-19 vaccines. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said today she supports the European Commission's threat to block exports of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which are produced on European soil. European officials have accused the Anglo-Swedish giant of prioritizing its contract with the UK while leaving them short. The EU's trade chief acknowledged supply problems, but he rejected accusations that cracking down on exports would amount to vaccine nationalism. Valdis Dombrovskis telling CNBC that he was focused on ensuring that pharmaceutical companies honor their contracts. Moving on to some of the day's other business headlines now. The EU's competition regulator has approved the €7.2 billion merger of two optical firms. EssilorLuxottica owns the Ray-Ban brand and makes eyewear for luxury groups including Chanel, Prada, and Versace. It agreed to sell off some 350 stores in order to complete its purchase of the Dutch retailer Grand Vision. Sales of new homes in the U.S. plunged over 18% in February. The Commerce Department said it was the slowest pace since May at the height of America's first pandemic restrictions. In part, it was because of severe winter storms and high lumber costs. And Chile plans to make 5G networks available across most of the country within 2 years. The plan would put the country well ahead of its regional neighbors, and government officials said they hoped it would attract Amazon to build a new data center in Chile rather than Argentina. The next generation mobile technology is slowly taking root across the globe. Here in France, the government is asking local officials to step up efforts to get more people to work from home. The official government guidance is that workers who can should work remotely at least 4 days a week, but the powers to enforce that are limited, as Brian Quinn reports.
At this Paris office, just a handful out of its dozens of employees are working on site. The rest are working from home. Those who want to come in have to make a reservation.
Les salariés qui sont ici peuvent jour par jour réserver des créneaux. Ça nous permet d'avoir une jauge maximum de 6 personnes par jour, au-delà de laquelle les gens ne peuvent tout simplement plus s'inscrire.
As the government tightens coronavirus restrictions, employees are expected to work on site just 1 day per week maximum. But many can't, and some don't even want to.
Je suis assistante dentaire en implantologie, donc ça m'est impossible de travailler à distance.
On a l'impression d'être au bureau quand on est chez soi, de travailler plus tard que d'habitude, de ne pas faire de pause.
Even before the latest lockdowns, teleworking has been strongly encouraged. But as of early March, one survey found that just 13% of French employees were working from home full-time. 65% weren't working remotely at all. The government is now pushing local officials to crack down, but their authority is limited.
Il y a eu de très nombreuses lois qui ont été votées, des ordonnances adoptées depuis le 15 mars 2020. La loi n'impose pas aux entreprises de recourir au télétravail.
Over the past year, some 65,000 inspections have been carried out to check compliance with teleworking directives. So far, just 55 formal warnings have been issued and no fines. The government, though, says more inspections are now coming, particularly in the banking and insurance sectors.
So certainly encouraged, but of course hard to enforce. And a lot of French workers and workers around the world saying that working from home is really taking a toll on their mental health as well,
Especially
Charlie.
after doing it for almost a year or
Absolutely.
longer. Kate Moody with our business update. Thank you so much.